Welcome back to Globewise Entertainment, the channel where cinema's most hidden, controversial, and unforgettable stories come to life. Today, we're diving into the strange, shocking, and often censored world of science fiction. These are the 15 banned or censored 90s sci-fi movies that shocked the world. Films that pushed boundaries, defied censors, and in some cases, disappeared from theaters entirely. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our deep dives into the wildest corners of movie history. And as you watch, tell us in the comments, which one of these banned sci-fi classics would you dare to watch today? 1. The Lawn Mower Man, 1992. When The Lawn Mower Man hit theaters in 1992, it promised to be a groundbreaking sci-fi thriller. Starring Pierce Brosnan as a scientist experimenting with virtual reality, and Jeff Fahey as the simple-minded gardener who becomes dangerously intelligent, the film tapped into early 90s fears about technology, mind control, and the digital future. But the movie didn't just stir excitement, it stirred controversy. Some countries censored it for its explicit violence and unsettling sexual content tied to VR simulations, claiming it blurred the lines between fantasy and morality. What really shocked audiences, though, was its disturbing finale, where the newly superintelligent Job tries to transcend the human body by uploading himself into cyberspace, a concept that felt terrifyingly plausible in an age just waking up to the internet. Adding to the uproar, Stephen King, whose short story inspired the title, sued the studio for falsely marketing it as Stephen King's The Lawn Mower Man. King won, forcing the studio to pull his name from all future releases. Despite the backlash, The Lawn Mower Man became a cult classic, remembered not only for its early CGI visuals but also for how it pushed censorship boards into panic mode. For many, it was the first sci-fi film to ask, what happens when virtual reality becomes more powerful than reality itself? 2. Strange Days, 1995. Too dark for its own time. In 1995, Kathryn Bigelow, who later became the first woman to win an Oscar for Best Director, released Strange Days, a sci-fi thriller unlike anything audiences had ever seen. Set in a gritty, not-so-distant future Los Angeles on the eve of the millennium, the film explored illegal virtual reality technology that let people relive other people's experiences, sometimes violent, sometimes erotic, and often disturbingly real. But what really shocked audiences and censors alike wasn't just the concept, it was the execution. Strange Days didn't shy away from raw, graphic depictions of police brutality, sexual violence, and voyeuristic obsession. At a time when America was still reeling from the Rodney King riots and public distrust of authority was at a boiling point, the movie's unflinching portrayal of corrupt cops and racial tension hit uncomfortably close to home. In some regions, the film faced restrictions and was heavily criticized for its disturbing VR assault sequence, so intense that it was almost cut entirely. Censors in several countries debated whether it went too far, and theaters in parts of Europe refused to screen it uncut. Critics were split, with some calling it exploitative while others hailed it as a bold, fearless look at the dark side of technology and society. Ironically, the film bombed at the box office upon release, but years later it gained cult status for being way ahead of its time. Today, with discussions about surveillance, virtual reality, and abuse of power dominating the headlines, Strange Days feels more relevant than ever. This was more than just a sci-fi movie, it was a warning. And maybe that's why it scared so many people in the 90s. 3. Tank Girl, 1995. When Tank Girl hit theaters in 1995, it wasn't your average sci-fi flick, it was a punk-fueled, anarchic explosion of chaos, sexuality, and satire that Hollywood didn't quite know what to do with. Based on the cult British comic series, the film told the story of Rebecca Buck, better known as Tank Girl, a rebellious anti-heroine surviving in a post-apocalyptic wasteland controlled by the tyrannical Water and Power Corporation. Armed with sarcasm, a tank, and zero respect for authority, Tank Girl became the ultimate symbol of 90s counterculture. But here's where things get messy. The studio, nervous about the film's edgy themes, ranging from overt feminism to bold sexual undertones and wild, surreal humor, ordered massive cuts. Over 30 minutes of footage, including raunchy jokes, violent sequences, and risque animated segments, were scrapped to avoid a dreaded NC-17 rating. The censorship didn't just water down the film, it gutted its rebellious heart. The result? Tank Girl bombed at the box office, critics were confused, and audiences didn't know what they were watching. Yet over time, the film developed a massive cult following. Fans praised its unapologetic feminist energy, its ahead-of-its-time style, and of course, Lori Petty's fearless performance as Tank Girl herself. To this day, many fans argue that the censored scenes could have made Tank Girl a 90s sci-fi classic instead of a misunderstood flop. It's a striking reminder of how Hollywood's fear of controversy and obsession with censorship can strip away the very soul of a story. Would Tank Girl have been a 90s sci-fi masterpiece if the censored footage had been left intact? Or was it always destined to be an underground cult gem? For Existence, 1999. When David Cronenberg released Existence in 1999, audiences were not prepared for the wild, disturbing ride that lay ahead. Known as the master of body horror, Cronenberg blended science fiction with surreal, grotesque imagery, creating a film that blurred the line between technology and flesh in ways that left many censors reeling. The story follows Allegra Geller, a brilliant game designer played by Jennifer Jason Leigh, who creates a virtual reality video game so realistic that players struggle to tell where the game ends and real life begins. But instead of futuristic headsets or holograms, the characters plug directly into their spines using strange, pulsating bioports and fleshy game pods that look eerily alive. The film doesn't just question reality, it makes the audience squirm with its unsettling visuals of human bodies merging with machines. At the time, critics and censors alike were divided. Some praised Existence as a bold exploration of technology, identity, and free will, while others found it grotesque and morally questionable. In several countries, the film faced heavy censorship for its graphic body imagery and sexual undertones, with some theaters outright refusing to screen it. In Britain, it was slapped with restrictive ratings, while in parts of Asia, certain sequences involving the spinal plugs were cut entirely for being too disturbing. Ironically, what made Existence so controversial in the 90s is exactly what makes it a cult classic today. With society now immersed in virtual reality, gaming addictions, and debates over AI, Cronenberg's bizarre vision feels less like shock value and more like prophecy. Despite its modest box office performance, Existence has grown into a must-watch sci-fi thriller for fans who love movies that push boundaries. Its censorship battles only added to its mystique, proving once again that the most daring films are often the ones that stand the test of time. 5. Hardware, 1990. The sci-fi nightmare too extreme for audiences. When Hardware hit theaters in 1990, it wasn't just another low-budget sci-fi flick, it was a gritty, post-apocalyptic shockwave that rattled audiences and censors alike. Directed by Richard Stanley, this cult cyberpunk horror tells the story of a lone scavenger who brings home a pile of robot scraps, only to discover he's unleashed a self-repairing, killer war machine inside his girlfriend's apartment. The film was grimy, violent, and unapologetically bleak, drenched in heavy metal aesthetics and industrial paranoia. But what really pushed Hardware into censorship territory was its graphic violence and disturbing sexual undertones. The murderous robot, known as Mark-13, didn't just kill, it mutilated and terrorized in ways that censors felt were far too intense for mainstream audiences. In the UK, the British Board of Film Classification, BBFC, slapped it with cuts to secure a release. Certain scenes, like the robot's horrific assault on Jill, the female lead, were deemed so disturbing they bordered on being video nasty material. In fact, some countries outright banned or heavily edited the movie, fearing its mix of sexual violence and mechanical terror would cause public outrage. But here's the twist. censorship didn't bury hardware. It made it legendary. Cult fans embraced it as a punk rock response to Hollywood sci-fi, far removed from the sleek optimism of Star Trek or Star Wars. Its brutal style influenced later dystopian films and earned it a lasting reputation as one of the grittiest cyber horror films of the 1990s. Today, Hardware is remembered not just for its censorship battles, but as a bold indie project that proved sci-fi could be raw, dangerous, and rebellious. It's the kind of film that shocked censors, but thrilled fans hungry for something darker than what the studios dared to release. 6. Screamers, 1995. In the mid-90s, when gritty sci-fi thrillers were making a comeback, Screamers, 1995, stood out as one of the most disturbing. Based on a short story by legendary writer Philip K. Dick, the film takes us to a war-ravaged planet where soldiers deploy self-replicating killing machines, tiny, intelligent robots that burrow underground and shred their prey with terrifying precision. At first, these machines, nicknamed Screamers because of the bone-chilling sound they make before attacking, were meant to protect. But like every great Philip K. Dick cautionary tale, they evolve beyond control. Soon, the machines begin to rebuild themselves in new forms, even disguising as humans, creating a paranoia-driven nightmare where no one knows who, or what, to trust. This level of violence and gore, combined with its bleak anti-war message, proved too much for several countries in the 1990s. The graphic scenes of mutilation, the sense of hopeless survival, and the moral implications of humans creating weapons that turn against them led to the film being heavily censored in places like Australia and parts of Europe. In some regions, entire sequences of robotic carnage were cut out to avoid an outright ban. Ironically, those cuts stripped away the very horror that made Screamers a cult classic. Today, fans view it as a forgotten gem of 90s sci-fi, blending Cold War paranoia, cyberpunk anxiety, and old-school monster movie terror. It's the kind of film that makes you wonder, if machines can think, evolve, and kill without remorse, how long before they replace us? 7. Cube, 1997. A puzzle of death that disturbed censors. When Cube hit theaters in 1997, it wasn't just another low-budget sci-fi thriller, it was a psychological nightmare wrapped inside a mathematical puzzle. Directed by Vincenzo Natali, this Canadian cult classic threw audiences into a terrifying maze of identical cube-shaped rooms, each hiding lethal traps designed to test the characters' intelligence, morality, and sheer will to survive. The film's stripped-down concept was deceptively simple. Strangers wake up inside a giant cube with no memory of how they got there, forced to work together, or turn against one another, to find an exit. But beneath the sci-fi premise, Cube exposed the darkest aspects of human nature: paranoia, betrayal, and the terrifying fragility of trust. Censors around the world were rattled, not because of over-the-top gore, but because of the unsettling ideas the film presented. In countries like Japan and Germany, critics argued that Cube's claustrophobic violence and psychological cruelty bordered on torture porn before the genre even existed. The way characters were dismembered, melted by acid, or crushed in silence shocked audiences unprepared for such raw brutality in an intellectual sci-fi. In some regions, the movie was temporarily restricted or slapped with severe ratings, with censors citing the combination of graphic violence and hopeless nihilism as dangerously disturbing. Ironically, those very qualities helped the film gain cult status worldwide. Viewers praised Cube for breaking away from glossy Hollywood blockbusters, proving that true terror could come from minimal sets, strong performances, and an unforgettable high-concept idea. Today, Cube is remembered not just as one of the most chilling sci-fi thrillers of the 90s, but also as a bold independent film that pushed boundaries so far it became a censorship target. Its legacy spawned sequels, remakes, and countless debates about whether the cube itself was a metaphor for society, government control, or the human condition itself. In the end, Cube wasn't just a movie, it was a disturbing mirror, forcing audiences to ask the most terrifying question of all: What would you do if survival meant betraying everyone around you? 8. Tetsuo 2, Body Hammer, 1992. In the early 90s, Japan unleashed one of the most disturbing cyberpunk sequels ever put to film, Tetsuo 2, Body Hammer. Directed by Shinya Tsukamoto, this follow-up to his cult classic Tetsuo, the Iron Man pushed the limits of body horror, violence, and surreal sci-fi imagery to extremes that many censors simply couldn't handle. The story follows an ordinary Japanese salaryman whose body begins to transform into a living weapon after his son is kidnapped. What begins as a tale of revenge spirals into a grotesque nightmare of steel, flesh, and uncontrollable rage. Muscles twist into metal pipes, veins erupt into gun barrels, and his very humanity is stripped away in an explosion of industrial chaos. For audiences in Japan, this was a shocking but visionary piece of cinema, reflecting deep anxieties about technology, masculinity, and post-industrial society. But outside Japan, censors didn't see art, they saw danger. The film's graphic body mutilations, extreme violence, and sexually charged imagery led to bans and heavy censorship in several countries, including parts of Europe. In the United Kingdom, distributors faced severe challenges getting the film past the British Board of Film Classification, while in Germany and Australia, screenings were cut or outright banned due to its relentless gore and disturbing themes. Even in the US, only underground midnight screenings and imported VHS tapes gave fans a chance to experience it uncut. Despite, or perhaps because of, this censorship, Tetsuo 2, Body Hammer became a cyberpunk legend, influencing filmmakers like the Wachowskis, The Matrix, and Darren Aronofsky, Pi. Today, it's remembered as one of the most extreme and unforgettable sci-fi films of the 1990s, a movie that dared to fuse industrial noise, body horror, and cyberpunk philosophy into a cinematic weapon. In short, this was the sci-fi sequel so shocking that the world tried to silence it, but ended up making it immortal. 9. Starship Troopers, 1997. When Paul Verhoeven released Starship Troopers in 1997, audiences expected a typical sci-fi space adventure filled with bug battles and futuristic soldiers. What they got instead was a shocking, satirical, and hyper-violent critique of fascism, militarism, and propaganda, wrapped in glossy Hollywood visuals. The film follows young recruits fighting a brutal intergalactic war against giant alien insects. On the surface, it looked like a patriotic war movie. But beneath the explosions and insect gore, Verhoeven was making a dark statement about blind nationalism, government control, and the disturbing ways media manipulates the public during wartime. Censors across the globe didn't know what to do with it. The film's graphic violence, from soldiers being torn in half to brains being sucked out by alien creatures, pushed ratings boards to their limits. In countries like Ireland and the UK, entire sequences had to be cut to secure release. Germany went even further, with critics accusing it of Nazi glorification, misreading Verhoeven's intentional satire. In fact, German authorities banned the movie outright for several years, fearing its militaristic imagery could be taken too seriously by extremist groups. What's ironic is that many mainstream American critics at the time also misunderstood the film, calling it dumb, brainless, and even propaganda. Only later did audiences and scholars reevaluate Starship Troopers as a brilliant piece of satirical filmmaking, holding up a mirror to society's darkest instincts during wartime. Today, the movie is a cult classic, and many argue it was way ahead of its time. Its message about governments using fear to control people feels eerily relevant in the 21st century. Starship Troopers may have been censored, banned, and criticized when it premiered, but in hindsight, it's one of the boldest and most misunderstood sci-fi films of the 90s. 10. Johnny Mnemonic, 1995. When people talk about the rise of cyberpunk cinema, Johnny Mnemonic often gets overlooked. But in 1995, this Keanu Reeves film was way ahead of its time. Based on a short story by legendary sci-fi writer William Gibson, The movie imagined a near future where information was literally smuggled inside the human brain. Sounds futuristic, right? But it was also uncomfortably close to real-world fears about the digital revolution, corporate control, and the explosive growth of the internet. What most viewers don't know is that Johnny Mnemonic ran into serious censorship issues overseas. The Japanese cut of the film was completely different from the one released in the US, featuring darker tones, extra violence, and extended scenes that leaned into the brutal, dystopian vision Gibson originally created. In some European markets, violent sequences involving cybernetic body modifications and disturbing imagery were cut down for being too graphic at the time. The controversy didn't end there. Critics slammed it for being too violent, too confusing, or simply too weird for mainstream audiences. But today, fans look back at Johnny Mnemonic as a cult gem, one that not only predicted our dependence on data and corporations, but also gave us an early glimpse of Keanu Reeves as a cyberpunk hero, paving the way for The Matrix just a few years later. Despite its flaws, Johnny Mnemonic shocked the 90s world by pushing boundaries in both style and subject matter. What was once censored for being too disturbing now feels eerily relevant in our modern, tech-obsessed world. 11. Natural-Born Killers, 1994. A media frenzy turned cultural nightmare. Oliver Stone's Natural-Born Killers isn't just a movie, it's a firestorm. Released in 1994, this hyper-stylized crime drama blurred the line between sci-fi satire and real-world horror, painting a chilling picture of a media-obsessed future where killers become celebrities. With Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis as Mickey and Mallory Knox, the film followed two lovers on a cross-country killing spree, but it wasn't the violence alone that terrified censors. The true shock came from the way it glorified media exploitation. Television, tabloids, and news anchors were portrayed as complicit in turning murder into entertainment, an eerily accurate prediction of the reality TV boom and our modern obsession with viral crime stories. But controversy exploded when real-life crimes began to mirror the movie. Several murders and violent incidents across the US and Europe were linked by prosecutors and parents to the film's influence, with some lawsuits even targeting Stone himself. Suddenly, Natural-Born Killers wasn't just a movie, it was branded as a cultural weapon too dangerous for public viewing. The film faced bans in Ireland, the UK, and even parts of the US, while other countries released it with heavy cuts, removing some of the film's most disturbing sequences. In France, police feared it might inspire youth riots. Even rental stores in conservative US states refused to carry it. Yet despite, or perhaps because of, its notoriety, Natural-Born Killers became a cult phenomenon. Today, critics argue it was far ahead of its time, exposing the toxic marriage of violence and mass media long before social media took over our lives. What was once considered a dangerous provocation is now seen as a darkly prophetic work of art. And here's the twist. The very censorship attempts only fueled its legend, proving the movie's own message, that the media's obsession with scandal and violence gives stories like Mickey and Mallory a life far bigger than the screen. 12. Crash, 1996. Few films from the 1990s stirred up as much controversy as David Cronenberg's Crash, 1996, a dark, twisted exploration of technology, sexuality, and obsession. Based on J.G. Ballard's novel, this provocative sci-fi drama follows a group of people who become sexually aroused by car accidents, finding a disturbing connection between human desire and modern machinery. When it premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, the movie instantly polarized audiences. Some critics hailed it as a bold masterpiece, while others condemned it as grotesque and immoral. In fact, the jury gave it a special jury prize for originality, daring, and audacity, but even that praise came with heavy backlash. In the UK, the film became a lightning rod for public outrage. The Daily Mail launched a full campaign against it, calling it sickening and demanding it be banned. Several cities, including Westminster in London, actually prohibited the film from being screened. Meanwhile, in the United States, It was slapped with an NC-17 rating, the kiss of death for most mainstream releases. Many theaters refused to show it, and major chains wouldn't touch it at all. Despite the censorship battles, Crash carved out a cult following. It pushed the boundaries of what sci-fi could be, not about space battles or futuristic tech, but about how our relationship with machines changes who we are at the most intimate level. Even today, it's remembered as one of the most controversial films of the 1990s, proving that sometimes cinema isn't just about entertainment, it's about provocation. What do you think? Was Crash an artistic masterpiece, or did it go too far? 13. The City of Lost Children, 1995. A surreal French sci-fi fantasy that pushed boundaries in the 1990s. Directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet and Marc Caro, the film tells the haunting tale of a mad scientist who kidnaps children in order to steal their dreams. With its nightmarish visuals, grotesque villains, and a storyline drenched in dark, fairy tale horror, it was unlike anything Hollywood audiences were used to at the time. But while critics praised its stunning production design and originality, the film faced heavy censorship in multiple countries. Because of its disturbing imagery, children in chains, twisted experiments, and an oppressive atmosphere that blurred the line between sci-fi and psychological horror. Some censors labeled it too unsettling for young audiences, while others argued its depictions of child abduction were simply too close to real-life fears of the 1990s. In the US, the film was slapped with an R rating, limiting its release to niche art house theaters. In countries like the UK and Germany, distributors cut or delayed screenings entirely, fearing public backlash. Yet despite the censorship, The City of Lost Children has since gained cult status, praised for its gothic world-building, unforgettable visuals, and as an early showcase for actor Ron Perlman before his Hellboy fame. Today, the film stands as proof that 90s sci-fi wasn't just about explosions and space battles. It could also be deeply unsettling, artistic, and ahead of its time. Its censorship only fueled its legend, making it one of the most hauntingly beautiful banned films of the decade. 14. Event Horizon, 1997. If you thought science fiction was all sleek spaceships and heroic astronauts, Event Horizon came to shatter that illusion. Released in 1997, this Paul W. /S. Anderson film blended cosmic exploration with nightmare-inducing horror, creating a movie so disturbing that audiences and censors alike didn't know how to handle it. The story follows a rescue crew sent to investigate the Event Horizon, a ship that mysteriously disappeared into a black hole and suddenly reappeared. What they discover isn't just a malfunctioning vessel, it's a portal to another dimension, one filled with visions of torment and pure madness. What really pushed the movie into censorship territory was its infamous hell sequence. Originally, Anderson shot graphic, chaotic images of the crew being tortured in horrific ways. Even the test audience screenings were so extreme that Paramount ordered much of it cut. Unfortunately, the studio destroyed the trimmed footage, meaning the legendary uncut version fans dream about may never exist. While Event Horizon bombed at the box office, it went on to become a cult classic, praised for its terrifying atmosphere, striking visuals, and bold mix of sci-fi and horror. For many, it felt like Hellraiser in space, too shocking for the mainstream in the late 90s, but unforgettable for those brave enough to watch it. Would you want to see the original and censored cut of Event Horizon, or is the theatrical version already scary enough? Tell us in the comments. 15. Tetsuo, the Iron Man. We have a movie that's not just science fiction, it's a full-blown nightmare captured on celluloid. Tetsuo, the Iron Man, a Japanese cyberpunk horror released at the very end of the 1980s, but making global shockwaves throughout the 1990s, was one of the strangest and most disturbing films ever conceived. Shot in gritty black and white with a shoestring budget, this film tells the grotesque story of a man whose body begins mutating into twisted chunks of metal, wires, and machine parts. Unlike Hollywood's polished sci-fi of the time, Tetsuo throws viewers into a chaotic, industrial hellscape, grinding metal, pulsating machinery, and surreal body horror. What really set off alarm bells among censors worldwide was its graphic imagery, violent transformations, and deeply unsettling sexual undertones. In many countries, the film was branded as too extreme for general audiences, often compared to a cyberpunk version of David Cronenberg's Videodrome. In fact, Tetsuo was banned or heavily censored in several regions across Europe and Asia during the 1990s, not because of mainstream controversy, but because its sheer intensity made distributors and censorship boards nervous. But here's the twist: what terrified some audiences actually cemented its cult status. Underground fans in the US, UK, and Germany hunted down bootleg VHS copies, passing them around like forbidden contraband. By the mid-90s, Tetsuo had become a legend of midnight cinema, influencing everything from Western cyberpunk films to music videos by artists like 9 Inch Nails. Today, it's remembered not only as a banned cult classic, but as a groundbreaking experiment in sci-fi horror, showing how fear of technology, the body, and the machine age could merge into one unforgettable nightmare. So when it came to Tetsuo, the Iron Man, censorship couldn't kill it. If anything, it only made the film stronger, scarier, and far more legendary. If you thought Hollywood special effects were intense, Tetsuo proves that imagination and shock value can outdo any budget. Would you dare watch this black and white nightmare today? Let us know in the comments. And there you have it, 15 banned or censored 90s sci-fi movies that shocked audiences around the world. Some were hidden away, some were cut to pieces, and others became underground legends that grew even stronger through controversy. If you enjoyed this countdown, don't forget to subscribe to Globewise Entertainment for more deep dives into the untold stories of cinema. And now it's your turn. Which of these shocking sci-fi films is your favorite, or which one are you most curious to watch? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing from you. Until next time, keep exploring the wild side of movie history, only here on Globewise Entertainment.